Here's how I turn this Fabric Godmother palm tree cotton eyelet into the scalloped apple green dress of my dreams. Hi everyone, today I'm doing some dyeing. I'm using RIT dye. This is the all-purpose dye, but I also recommend the synthetic dye more for non-natural fibres. So we've got our dye, that's going to be great. I've also got this 20 litre bin that's an IKEA bin that is a great size for dyeing fabric. I've also done the stovetop method. Maybe I'll go into that another day, but this 20 litre bin is the perfect size from IKEA. I've also got fairy liquid because RIT needs a little teaspoon of washing up liquid in the bowl. Table salt, that helps activate the dye and help it adhere to natural fibres. So I've got my half cup measuring spoon and I'm going to put a full cup of that in. Then I've got my thermometer. This is not my normal thermometer. My husband lent me this one, but essentially I'm going to make sure that the water's nice and hot because heat also really helps with the success of your dyeing. A big stirring implement to try and avoid touching the dye as much as possible, and gloves to make sure I don't touch the dye. It will still get on me, I'm sure. I'll splash myself somehow, but gloves are an essential so you don't end up with green fingernails in this case. I have about 1.5 pounds of fabric. So normally you would use half a bottle of dye per pound of fabric, but I want a really rich colour, so I'm going to use the entire bottle. And let's see what colour we can achieve with this lovely apple green. What are you doing, Zoe? You come to stalk me? Yeah. What are you doing? What are you doing? Not my cat. We have 11.5 litres of hot water with salt and soap. Giving it a good stir. Okay. The ideal temperature is at least 60. I ended up boiling my water on the hob, so we're at 80. That's good enough for me. We're going to use the whole tub. Ooh yeah. Of course, the cat wants to get involved. That is my cat. Probably have to chase the other cat. What's going on? Hello. This is the only problem with using a black tub. You won't really see anything. Okay. Test swatch. I was reliably told that this is 100% cotton with cotton embroidery. I'm going to stick it to the side. And I'm going to leave that for a minute while I go and get my fabric. Let's see how our test swatch is getting on. Oh my gosh, that's looking amazing. Get your gloves, Amy. This is where I always forget to put my well-loved gloves on. I was recently bleaching some fabric, so they took a bit of a battering. Probably owe myself a new pair. Ah, yes, that is going to be amazing. I don't know if it's come across how good it is in real life, but we're going in. So the top priority is this one. And then I don't mind if the cotton lawn is a bit paler. Motion is the key. The colour in person is amazing. I think the steam's getting on the camera lens. So remember, it's hot, hot, hot. So I'm trying not to pull it too much. And I want to make sure it's got plenty of room to move. I want to give it a real good soak before I add the cotton lawn. I think that embroidery is coming out lovely. Okay, second lot going in. They're going to share the dye bath. So that is 2.5 metres of eyelet and 2.5 metres of cotton lawn. So I don't mind if the cotton lawn is a slightly different colour because it's going to be the lining, and if it's slightly lighter, that'll help the eyelet show, like the detail in the eyelet show through. It's not gone in that much longer after, but it's got less chance of being as solid given that I gave it a about 15 minute head start, the eyelet. So both of these fabrics are 100% cotton. So you could leave them in for an hour. I'm liking how it's looking. A lot will wash off, so I'm going to go for half an hour and then have a look. I think we're holding our heat well. It's a good tub, this. Oh, 60, still 60, still over 60. We want it in every nook and cranny of the fabric. So cotton can handle a really high heat. You think like you would wash, cotton sheets on 90 if you were doing a really hygienic clean. They can handle that heat. Something more delicate, I'm not sure I would put through a 90-degree heat. So we're at 60 now, which is the minimum kind of advised temperature for dyeing, and we're about halfway through. So I think that's good. That's why it's always better to start a bit higher if your fabric can handle it. And keep moving it. I've got quite a good tolerance for hot water. Not everyone has, so if you can't put your hands in, just really agitate your fabric with a nice long stirrer. We don't want any dye settling in creases. There's my sample again. Looking good. Don't want dye settling in the creases. We don't want any sort of spots where it's missed, like pale patches. So every now and then it's good to like open out the entire fabric, trying not to splosh too much, though it does eventually come out the paving stones. Oh yeah. Okay, I've decided to call it quits. The green lining has been in for about 45 minutes. That's looking good. Good solid colour. The anglais, the broderie, has been in for over an hour now. I'm very happy with that shade. I wanted it like appley Monstera green, which I think it will be when it washes out. Lovely. Okay, now comes the hard part, emptying it all out. Gotta get it back in the pan. Ugh. Yum, 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 greens for dinner. The last step was to dunk the fabric in an ice cold water bath for a few minutes. This helps close up the fibres of the fabric and lock in the colour. In an ideal world, I would have also used a fixative. This is an extra step to help with colour preservation, but given this dress isn't going to be machine washed often, the colour will last fine without it. Watching the fabric dry on the line had me so excited. It was time to bring the vision to life. I wanted a scalloped neckline, scalloped hem, and then a simple bodice with gathered skirt. I prepped a pair of pretty scalloped sleeves, but you might notice those aren't on the finished garment. More on that later. The dress was being made for our trip to Saint-Tropez, and by the time I finished dyeing the fabric, I was running out of time to make the dress. I decided to adapt McCall's 7608 and drafted a scallop neckline. Then I rotated the dart from the waist to an angled bust dart. It was quite a big dart, so I had to decide how much to turn into a bust dart, and I rotated some of it into the armhole. I could have done this in a slower, prettier way. Sorry if you're trying to follow along, but I wanted to get moving with my plans. If you're not familiar with dart rotation, drop a comment below and I could film a slower tutorial. There's a few techniques for how to do this. I'd be happy to share. I used my Burda plain tissue paper for the drafting and filling in the gaps after the dart rotation. And then you sort of fold out the darts as if you were going to assemble it to redraw the side seam.
What's he doing? Are you going to sew it for me?
I portioned off the fabric into a section for the skirt with a single seam, pattern matched as best as I could, and then everything above used for the bodice. In case you missed it, we didn't go to Saint-Tropez. The holiday had to be cancelled the morning we were due to fly because my husband was suddenly taken sick. So the dress went in the wardrobe to wait for next year, but I was actually convinced to finish this draft video by some lovely viewers. So here we are. But yeah, when it came to cutting out the bodice, I decided to underline the eyelet, which basically means I mounted the fabric on top of plain lawn. So right sides up with plain lawn underneath. And then you sew, well, pin first and then sew all the way around the outside to join the layers. Then you can sort of treat it as a single fabric. So I could sew the darts through both fabrics as if they were one, and that hides the dart like excess fabric inside the garment. So here's how that looks. And after that, I could assemble the bodice at the shoulder seams and the side seams. And then I was ready to add the lining. I then cut a lining from plain lawn as well and assembled that and sewed the two together around the neckline. My neckline scallops are quite nice and wide, which made them easy to clip and turn right sides out. The most important part of sewing a scallop of any size is the couple of flat stitches you sew between each scallop point. It's not actually a true sharp point, it's ever so slightly flattened off, and this allows you to clip properly and turn through without any puckering. I like to use pinking shears as a quick way to sort of like replace clipping and notching on a gentle curve like this. Then I understitched and pressed everything flat. I worked really hard on print placement to position the palm trees on like sort of either side of my upper chest, and then the dots of the center falling really nicely at the bottom of the neckline opening. Yeah, it took me a long time to plan that positioning. The armholes were pinned to hold the outer lining together. Then, like I say, I created those scalloped sleeves as like a cap style sleeve sewn into the upper portion of the armhole that would be finished with bias binding around the lower part of the armhole. But when I tried the bodice on, they looked pretty, but they actually made me feel like a linebacker, like a rugby player, a big American football player, a very wide silhouette that I wasn't comfortable with. So off they came. For the skirt, I didn't have enough fabric to line it in a single piece like I'd assembled the outer, so that either meant having a smaller, less gathered lining inside the skirt or sewing two seams in the lining compared to the eyelet having one. I decided you wouldn't really notice a second seam in the gathered skirt, so pushed ahead assembling it that way. I French seamed the lining, which many of you will probably be very familiar with, but as a reminder, this is where you sew a narrow seam with the fabric wrong sides together, usually at 1 centimetre. Then you trim that allowance to 3 or 4 millimetres. Then you press the fabric right sides together, and the second seam is sewn at 5 millimetres. So if you're keeping up with the maths, that makes up 15 millimetres, aka 1.5 centimetres of the seam. There are plenty of tutorials that play around with the seam amounts for the first and second pass, but they have to add up to the right final seam allowance. Doing it this way let me create the scalloped hem. I drew the stitching line onto the reverse of the fabric, pivoting around the circle stitching at the inner point between the scallops. Then I could clip and trim just like before with the pinking shears. turning, pressing and understitching to get it looking gorgeous. Then I tack the layers together at the waist and gather them both as one fabric. The dress is intentionally loose so I can throw it on over my head, but then I plan to make a plain green belt with a buckle and eyelet closures, but the buckram for the belt didn't arrive in time, and hilariously it didn't even matter in the end. That's the finished dress. I'll be back again soon with a new video and a new giveaway, so thanks for watching.